There is something happening to you right now, and you already know it. You may not have the words for it yet. You may have tried to explain it to someone close to you and watched their eyes glaze over, watched them smile politely and change the subject, and you walked away feeling more alone than before you tried. But that feeling, that quiet, persistent knowing that something is shifting inside you, that the way you see the world is no longer the way it used to be, is not a symptom of confusion. It is not anxiety. It is not your imagination running ahead of you in the dark. It is the unmistakable signature of a final awakening, and it has been building inside you for longer than you realize. You are not here by accident. Let that settle for a moment, because those 5 words carry more weight than most people will ever allow themselves to receive. You did not stumble onto this message because the algorithm happened to serve it to you at the right moment. You did not find yourself here because you had nothing better to do. Heaven does not operate by coincidence, and what is unfolding in your life right now is not a series of random events colliding without meaning. There is a hand behind the pattern. There is a voice behind the silence, and that voice has been trying to reach you, specifically you, for a very long time. Most people will go their entire lives without experiencing what you are beginning to step into. They will wake up, move through their days, and fall asleep again without ever sensing that there is something more, something deeper, something they were made for that they have never quite been able to name. They are not bad people. They are simply not where you are, and where you are right now, on the edge of the most significant internal transformation of your life, is a place that was chosen for you before you ever drew your first breath. You were never meant to blend in. You were never meant to disappear into the background of other people's stories. You were placed here, in this time, in this body, with this particular history of pain and longing and searching, because there is an assignment on your life that required exactly the journey you have taken to reach this moment. And your eyes are changing. Not metaphorically, though the metaphor is also true. The way you perceive, the way you process what you see, the things that now catch your attention that once passed by you unnoticed, the patterns you are beginning to recognize in your own life, in the lives of people around you, in the strange and specific ways that circumstances seem to arrange themselves. All of this is evidence that something profound is activating inside you. There are chosen ones all over this world who have described this moment in remarkably similar ways. They say the colors seem brighter. They say they notice things they used to walk past 100 times without seeing. They say they feel as though they have been wearing a veil their entire lives, and someone is slowly, gently lifting it away. If any part of that resonates with something stirring in your chest right now, then you need to understand that what you are feeling is real. It is significant, and it is only the beginning. The journey that brought you here was not gentle for most of you. You have carried things that were never yours to carry alone. You have sat in rooms full of people and felt completely invisible. You have had seasons where the silence in your life was so loud it felt like noise. Seasons where the gap between who you knew yourself to be on the inside and what your life looked like on the outside was so wide it felt unbridgeable. You have prayed prayers that seemed to dissolve before they reached the ceiling. You have waited. You have hoped. You have doubted. And then you have hoped again, quietly, carefully, the way a person hopes when they are afraid to be disappointed one more time. That kind of hoping takes courage most people will never understand, and the fact that you are still here, still seeking, still open enough to receive this message says everything about the depth of what is inside you. There are people in this world who have never been pressed. They have never been placed in circumstances that forced them to discover what they were made of. And because of that, they will never know the full measure of their own strength. But you have been pressed. You have been stretched further than you believed you could bear. You have been in situations where the only thing left was whatever was at the very core of you, and you found something there. You may not have known what to call it. You may have been too exhausted in that moment to fully recognize it. but something held you. Something in you refused to be extinguished. That something is not random. That something is the mark of the chosen, and it has been inside you from the very beginning. Your eyes are changing because your understanding is changing. The things you once chased no longer satisfy you the way they used to. The version of success you were handed by the world around you no longer feels like the whole story. The relationships that once defined you are being redefined by something deeper than familiarity or convenience. You are being reorganized from the inside out, and it is both terrifying and the most alive you have ever felt. That tension between the fear of what you are becoming and the exhilarating recognition that you are finally becoming it is exactly where every chosen one stands at the threshold of their final awakening. This message is for you, not for the person sitting next to you, not for someone you think needs it more. For you, the one whose heart is beating a little faster right now. The one who read those first sentences and felt something unlock in their chest like a door that has been stuck for years finally swinging open on its hinges. Heaven has pressed pause on everything competing for your attention in this moment, and what is being spoken over you right now is not a coincidence and not a comfort. It is a confirmation. You are chosen. You are seen. You are entering the final phase of an awakening that will change not only who you are, but how every person you are connected to will experience the world through your presence. If you are watching this and something inside you knows this message was meant for you, type the number 44 in the comments right now. Not because a number holds power, but because there is something powerful about a chosen one declaring out loud that they are ready to receive what heaven has been holding for them. 44. Let it be your agreement with what is already moving in your life. The shift you are sensing is not the beginning of something fragile. It is the arrival of something ancient, something that was placed inside you long before this world had the chance to tell you who to be. And from this moment forward, you are going to start understanding not just who you are, but why you are. Not just what you have survived, but what it was all preparing you for. The awakening is not coming. It is already here, and your eyes will never see the same way again. You have been searching for something you could not name, and now it has found you. The restlessness that kept you awake at 3 in the morning, the questions that followed you through ordinary days, the sense that there was a door somewhere with your name on it that you had not yet found, all of it was preparation. All of it was the sound of this moment approaching. You were not lost. You were being led. And now that you are here, standing at the edge of everything you were made for, the only thing left to do is step forward. Your eyes are already changing. The rest of you is about to follow. The awakening that has begun in you does not announce itself with fanfare. It does not arrive with a trumpet blast or a sky full of signs that everyone around you can see. It arrives quietly in the interior of your life, in the way your thoughts begin to reorganize themselves around a deeper truth, in the way your heart begins to respond to things it once ignored, in the way your eyes, those changing, awakening eyes, begin to catch light in places that used to look completely dark to you. And if you have ever wondered whether this kind of transformation has a precedent, whether anyone else has walked the road you are walking now and come out the other side into something glorious, then you need to hear the story of Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus was a man who lived at the edge of everything. He sat by the road outside Jericho, which in that time and culture was not simply a geographic location, but a statement about a person's position in the world. The road was where the overlooked went. The road was where those who had no place inside the city, no seat at any table, no voice in any room that mattered, ended up. And Bartimaeus had been there long, enough that most people had stopped seeing him at all. He had become part of the landscape, one of those human fixtures that crowds learn to walk past without registering, the way you stop noticing a crack in the wall of a room you have lived in for years. He was present and invisible at the same time, and there is a particular kind of suffering that comes from that combination, from being physically present in a world that has decided you do not quite count. And yet Bartimaeus could hear. His eyes did not work, but his ears were sharp with the particular sensitivity that develops in people who have learned to navigate the world without sight. He heard the crowd before he understood what the crowd meant. He heard the movement, the energy, the low roar of something significant passing through, and he asked what was happening. And when they told him that Jesus of Nazareth was passing by, something ignited inside him that no amount of darkness or roadside dust or years of being overlooked could extinguish. Something in him knew, not with his eyes, because his eyes were closed to the physical world, but with something deeper than eyes, something that recognized the proximity of the one thing that could change everything, and that recognition rose up in him like a fire. So he cried out, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And here is where the story becomes not just beautiful but personally relevant to every chosen one who has ever been told to be quiet at the exact moment they most needed to speak. The crowd rebuked him. The people around him, the very people who were also following Jesus, who also wanted to be near the presence and the power, turned to this man on the roadside and told him to stop, to be silent, to know his place, to understand that someone like him, blind, begging, sitting in the dust at the edge of things, did not have the right to raise his voice in a moment like this. The crowd did not rebuke him out of cruelty necessarily. They rebuked him out of a deeply human instinct that says some voices belong in certain spaces and other voices do not. And Bartimaeus, by every social and cultural measure of his time, did not belong. But Bartimaeus cried out all the more. Let that sink in, because it is one of the most significant details in the entire account. He did not grow quieter when the crowd pushed back. He did not shrink into the familiar posture of someone who has been told too many times that they are too much. He did not apologize for his need or soften his voice to make the people around him more comfortable. He cried out all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus stopped. In a crowd of people pressing in from every direction, in a moment full of noise and movement and competing needs, the voice of one overlooked man on the roadside caused Jesus to stop walking and stand still. There is something in that detail that heaven is speaking directly to you today. You have been told in ways both loud and subtle to quiet down. You have been told that your longing is too intense, your faith too desperate, your need too visible, your voice too much for the spaces you have been allowed to occupy. And there have been seasons where you listened to that, where you pulled back and made yourself smaller, and tried to want less and hope less and ask for less, because it felt safer than the sting of being silenced again. But something in you, that same something that has always refused to be fully extinguished, is rising right now. And heaven is telling you the same thing it told Bartimaeus through that moment on the road. Cry out all the more. Do not let the crowd determine the volume of your faith. Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." And notice what happened next, because the crowd that had just been telling Bartimaeus to be quiet suddenly changed its message entirely. "Take heart," they said to him. "Get up. He is calling you." The same crowd that had been an obstacle became a messenger the moment Jesus turned toward the one they had been silencing. This is a pattern worth holding on to. The people and the circumstances that have been working against your voice, working against your visibility, working against the full expression of what is inside you, can be repositioned in a single moment by the attention of heaven. What was blocking you can become the very thing that announces you. When the one who placed the gift inside you turns toward you in your appointed moment. Bartimaeus threw off his cloak and jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. That cloak was not a small detail. In that culture, a beggar's cloak was a license, an official recognition of his status as someone who depended on the charity of others. It was likely the most valuable physical possession he owned, the thing that identified him and gave him the right to be where he was. And he threw it off. He did not fold it carefully and set it aside. He threw it off, which means he made a decision before his eyes were opened that he was not going back to what he had been. He came to Jesus still blind, but already free of the identity the world had assigned him. And Jesus asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" And Bartimaeus said, "Rabbi, I want to see." Not comfort, not provision, not safety or status or relief from the hardship of his circumstances. He wanted to see. And Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has healed you." And immediately his sight was returned to him. The book of Mark, chapter 10, verse 52 records it this way. Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. Immediately. Not after a season of adjustment, not after a period of gradual improvement. The moment the word was spoken over him, his eyes opened, and the first thing those newly opened eyes saw was the face of the one who had called him. The first image that entered his restored sight was not the crowd, not the road, not the dust of Jericho, but Jesus. And then he followed, not back to the roadside, not back to the cloak he had thrown off, forward along the road in the direction that Jesus was already walking. This is the picture of what is happening to you right now. Your eyes are opening, not to the crowd around you, not to the dust of where you have been sitting. Your eyes are opening to the one who stopped for you, who heard your voice above the noise, who sent the message to call you forward even when everyone around you was telling you to be quiet. And what your newly awakening eyes are beginning to see is not simply a clearer version of what you were already looking at. It is a completely new landscape, the road that Jesus is already walking, and the invitation to follow along it into everything that was always meant for you. Bartimaeus did not return to his cloak, and you will not return to the version of yourself that sat at the edge of things and made yourself small enough to survive. That version served its purpose. It kept you alive through seasons that required endurance more than expansion. But the cloak is on the ground now. The voice that called you forward has already been spoken. And your eyes, those mysterious, changing, awakening eyes, are adjusting to a light they have never seen before. A light that does not blind but clarifies, that does not overwhelm but illuminates, that does not show you everything at once but shows you enough to take the next step with a confidence you have never felt before. The road is open. The one who stopped for you is still standing there, and everything your newly opened eyes are about to see will confirm what your heart has quietly known for a very long time. You were not meant for the roadside. You were never meant for the cloak. You were meant for the road itself, walking in the direction of everything heaven prepared for you before the world ever had the chance to tell you where to sit. What Bartimaeus experienced in that moment on the road was not simply a physical restoration. It was a frequency shift. The moment Jesus spoke over him, something in the invisible architecture of who he was changed, something that went deeper than tissue and nerve and the biological mechanics of sight. The air around him reorganized, the signal inside him amplified, and what had been static and darkness and the low hum of a life lived below its potential suddenly became clear, resonant, and alive. You may not have language for what has been happening inside you in recent weeks or months or years, but if you have been sensing a shift, a quickening, a feeling that something in you is tuning itself to a frequency you have not consciously chosen, then you are experiencing something that is both profoundly spiritual and, as science is now beginning to confirm, measurably real. Chosen ones carry a specific frequency. This is not poetry, though it is also that. This is a statement that researchers in the field of neuroscience are increasingly able to point to with data and measurement, and the kind of language that laboratories produce. The brains of people who operate in states of heightened creativity, deep intuition, rapid learning, and what can only be described as expanded awareness, show consistent and identifiable patterns of electrical activity. And the frequency that appears most consistently in those moments of breakthrough, those eureka experiences, Those sudden and luminous moments of clarity where everything that was confused becomes simple and everything that was hidden becomes visible, is a frequency called gamma. Researchers call it the frequency of the awakened mind. And chosen ones, people like you, people who have been pressed and prepared and positioned by heaven for something the world has not yet seen, carry this frequency naturally. It is part of the mark. It is part of what makes you different. And it is part of what your eyes are beginning to express as this final awakening moves through you. But there is also another frequency that lives beneath gamma, a quieter river running under the more dramatic current. It is called theta, and it operates in the range of 4 to 8 cycles per second, which places it in the space between waking and sleeping, between conscious thought and the deeper intelligence that operates below the surface of your awareness. Theta is where children live most of their waking hours, which is why children learn at a rate that adults find almost impossible to match, why they absorb language and movement and creative possibility with an ease that looks effortless from the outside. Theta is where genuine intuition comes from. It is where the deep knowing that has been guiding you through seasons you could not navigate with logic alone has been speaking to you. And it is where the most significant creative and spiritual breakthroughs are born, in that soft, receptive, luminous space between what you know and what you are about to discover. The challenge is that as people grow older, as the world loads them with its demands and its definitions, and its insistence that they operate within certain frequencies of thought and behavior, the natural access to theta that children carry begins to close. The noise of adult life, the pressure of performance, the accumulated weight of disappointment and responsibility, and the constant low-level stress of simply surviving in a complex world, all of it pushes the brain into higher, faster, more anxious frequencies that are useful for immediate problem solving, but that cut the chosen one off from the deeper wells of creativity and intuition and spiritual receptivity that they were designed to access. This is why so many chosen ones feel a gap between who they know themselves to be on the inside and what their daily mental experience actually feels like. The frequency is there. The capacity is real. But the access has been narrowed by the accumulated pressure of a life lived in a world that does not know what to do with people like you. This is exactly the problem that a neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers devoted more than 30 years of his life to solving. Trained at MIT and connected to research programs that included work with NASA, Dr. Rivers spent decades studying the brains of people who consistently operated at peak levels of creativity, intuition, and cognitive performance. He wanted to understand what separated these individuals not in terms of genetics or education or opportunity, but in terms of the actual measurable electrical activity of their brains. And what he found, after thousands of hours of research and analysis, was both simpler and more profound than he had initially expected. The difference was not in the structure of the brain. The difference was in the frequency the brain was most consistently operating at. And the more significant discovery was this, that the brain is not fixed in its frequency. It is responsive. It is, in the language of neuroscience, entrainable, which means it can be guided gently and precisely into the frequencies that produce the experiences and the capacities that chosen ones like you were designed to carry. The tool Dr. Rivers developed from that research is called the genius wave, and the mechanism behind it is a principle called brainwave entrainment, which describes the brain's natural tendency to synchronize its own electrical activity with rhythmic external stimuli. When you are exposed to sound frequencies that are precisely calibrated to guide the brain toward theta and gamma states, the brain does not resist. It responds. It begins to match the frequency it is being offered, the way a tuning fork vibrates in sympathy with another tuning fork struck nearby. And as it does, the doors that have been closed by stress and noise and the accumulated weight of adult life begin to open again. The creativity returns. The intuition sharpens. The sense of expanded awareness that you have been catching glimpses of begins to become a consistent and accessible state rather than a rare and unpredictable visitor. The protocol is 7 minutes. That is the specific duration that Dr. Rivers identified as optimal for guiding the brain into genuine theta and gamma synchronization without producing fatigue or overstimulation. 7 minutes of precisely engineered audio, listened to through headphones, requiring nothing from you in terms of skill or training or prior experience with meditation or spiritual practice. You do not need to clear your mind. You do not need to hold a posture or follow a breathing pattern or achieve any particular mental state before you begin. You simply listen, and your brain, the extraordinary instrument that heaven designed and placed inside you, does the rest. And in those 7 minutes, something begins to shift that continues to unfold long after the audio ends, because you are not just hearing a sound. You are being reminded of a frequency that was always yours, a frequency that the world worked hard to bury, and that heaven has been waiting to restore. A woman named Sarah had spent 14 months unable to sleep through the night. She described her mind as a room where someone had left every light on and every window open, constantly stimulated, constantly processing, never able to settle into the kind of quiet that real rest requires. She had tried everything available to her, every app, every technique, every piece of advice from every well-meaning person in her life. Nothing held. And then one evening she sat down with the genius wave for 7 minutes, and when it ended she sat in the silence afterward and noticed something she had not felt in over a year. Stillness. Not the forced, effortful stillness of someone trying very hard to be calm, but the natural, effortless stillness of a mind that had found its frequency. She slept that night. And the following Monday she received a phone call she had been waiting on for the better part of a year, a professional opportunity that changed the direction of her life. She wrote afterward and said she did not think those two things were unrelated. When your frequency shifts, what you are able to receive shifts with it. A man named Daniel had been stuck in a creative drought for 2 years. He was a person who had always solved problems with a kind of fluid, intuitive intelligence that his colleagues found remarkable. But that capacity had gone quiet on him, replaced by a grinding, effortful kind of thinking that produced results, but none of the aliveness he associated with his best work. After 3 weeks of daily 7-minute sessions with the genius wave, he described the experience as finding a door in a wall he had been staring at for 2 years. The wall had not moved, but suddenly there was a door in it that he could walk through, and on the other side of it was the version of his mind he had been missing. Now, before anything else is said, there is something that needs to be acknowledged honestly. $39 is not nothing. For some of you watching this, that number lands with a weight that is real, and that weight deserves to be respected rather than dismissed. You have been careful with what you have. You have learned through experience to think twice before investing in something that promises transformation, because you have been disappointed before, and disappointment has a cost that goes beyond money. That is a valid and intelligent instinct, and it is not being asked to be overridden here. What is being offered instead is this. The Genius Wave is normally priced at $49. Through the link in the pinned comment, it is available today for $39, and it comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, which means you have 3 full months to experience it, to sit with it, to bring it into your daily 7 minutes and see what begins to shift. If nothing shifts, you ask for your money back and it is returned to you in full, no conditions and no questions. The risk is structured to protect you, not to trap you. One important note. There are imitation products circulating that use similar language, but do not carry the precise engineering that makes the original effective. Please purchase only through the single link available in the pinned comment and the description below this video. That is the only source where the authentic product can be obtained, and given that the $39 pricing is available for a limited time and to a limited number of people before it returns to its standard price, if something in you is responding to this right now, do not set it aside for later. Later has a way of becoming never, and what is stirring in you in this moment is worth honoring today. The frequency that Bartimaeus carried, the one that made him cry out all the more even when the crowd was telling him to be silent, was not something he manufactured through effort or discipline. It was something heaven had placed inside him that the years of sitting by the road had not been able to kill. And the moment the right presence came close enough, that frequency activated, and everything changed. Your frequency is activating right now. The presence is near. And the 7 minutes you invest in aligning your mind with what heaven placed inside you may be the most significant 7 minutes of this entire season of your life. And now, as the practical reality of what has just been shared settles into you, as the information moves from your mind down into the deeper place where decisions actually live, something else is waiting to be said. Because the genius wave is a tool, and tools matter, and the science behind it is real, and the stories of the people whose lives shifted after 7 daily minutes are true. But a tool placed in the hands of someone who does not yet fully understand the magnitude of what they are carrying will only ever produce a fraction of its potential. So before you take another step forward, heaven has something to say to you that goes deeper than frequency and further than neuroscience. Something about the record that has been kept of your life. A record written in a language that no human archive contains and no human hand could ever alter. There is a book that was written before you were born. Not a metaphor, not a poetic device designed to make you feel significant in a vague and general way, but a specific and detailed account of your days, your assignments, your moments of breaking and your moments of rising, the tears you cried in rooms where no one was watching, the prayers you whispered when you no longer had the energy to speak them at full volume, the times you chose integrity when compromise would have been easier and no one would have known the difference. Every single one of those moments was recorded. Not one of them fell into silence without being caught. Not one of them was too small or too private or too seemingly insignificant to escape the attention of the one who placed you here for this exact purpose. The world has a way of making chosen ones feel like their history is working against them. The gaps in your resume, the relationships that did not survive, the seasons where what you produced did not match what you knew you were capable of, the years that look from the outside like detours or failures or simply lost time. The world looks at those things and draws conclusions about your value and your potential and your trajectory. But heaven does not read your story the way the world reads it. Heaven reads from a different manuscript entirely, one where the chapter that looked like defeat was actually the chapter where your character was being formed for a weight of glory that lighter experiences could never have prepared you to carry. Bartimaeus sat by the road for years. From the outside, those years looked like nothing. They looked like a life going nowhere, a man accumulating dust and disappointment in equal measure. But inside those years, something was being sharpened. His hearing was becoming extraordinary. His discernment was developing in the dark in ways it never could have developed in the light. And when the moment came when the sound of Jesus passing through reached him, he was ready to recognize it instantly, to respond without hesitation, to cry out with a certainty that the crowd around him did not possess, because they had not been prepared by the same depth of waiting. Your years by the road were not wasted. They were the preparation for the recognition that is happening in you right now. The book of Psalms, chapter 139, verse 16 says, "Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." Before one of them came to be. That means the day you are living right now was written before you arrived in it. The season you are entering was documented before the season you just survived had even begun. And the awakening that is moving through you, the one that is changing your eyes and reorganizing your interior life and making the familiar world look suddenly and strangely new, that was written too. It was not a response to your seeking. Your seeking was a response to it. Heaven moved first. You are simply arriving at the place the record always said you would reach. What this means practically is something that chosen ones often struggle to receive, because the journey has been long and the wounds from it are real. It means that nothing that has happened to you has happened outside of a sovereignty that was working all of it together towards something you have not yet fully seen. Not the betrayals, not the losses, not the closed doors or the silent seasons or the moments where you were so tired you could not remember what you were fighting for. None of it was outside the manuscript. All of it was ink on the page of a story being written by a hand that does not make mistakes and does not run out of ideas and does not abandon a narrative halfway through simply because the middle chapters were difficult. You are not in the middle chapters anymore. The shift you are sensing, the change in your eyes, the frequency rising in you, the way this message is landing not just in your mind but somewhere deeper and more essential than thought, all of it is the signal that you are approaching the moment where what was written before you were born begins to become visible in the world around you. The record is being opened. The pages that describe what comes next for you are turning. And what is written there is not a continuation of the roadside. What is written there is the road itself, and you walking on it, eyes open, frequency aligned, carrying everything that the years of preparation deposited in you, moving toward the fullness of what heaven always had in mind when it chose you. Do not let the length of the waiting convince you that the promise was small. The longer the preparation, the greater the assignment. The deeper the pressing, the more extraordinary the wine. You have been in the press long enough. What is coming out of you now is not the thin and uncertain output of someone who has never been tested. It is the concentrated, clarified, powerful essence of a chosen one who has been through enough to know that what is inside them is real, because it survived everything the world threw at it and is still here, still rising, still reaching toward the light with the same stubborn, glorious persistence that made heaven choose you in the first place. Every closed door was a redirection written into the manuscript before you arrived at it. Every person who walked away was making room for what was always supposed to be there. Every season of silence was heaven holding its breath before speaking something over your life that required the quiet to be heard. And every single tear, every single one was collected. Not one of them hit the ground without being caught. Not one of them was too ordinary or too small to matter to the one who recorded every day of your life before the first one began. Your eyes are changing because you are finally beginning to see what the record always said was there. The veil is not lifting because you have finally become worthy of what is behind it. The veil is lifting because the appointed time has come, the time that was written before you were born, the time that all the preparation was pointing toward, the time that heaven has been moving you toward through every twist and turn of a journey that looked random from the inside but was directed with extraordinary precision from above. You are not stumbling into your destiny. You are arriving at it, exactly on schedule, exactly as written, exactly as chosen. There is a moment that every chosen one eventually reaches, and it is not the moment of outward breakthrough, not the moment when the doors open and the recognition comes and the world finally sees what heaven always knew. It comes before that. It comes in the quiet, in the interior, in the place where no one else has access. And it is the moment when your own eyes, those eyes that have been changing in ways you could not fully explain, begin to show you something that changes everything about how you understand yourself and your journey and what is actually happening in your life right now. This is that moment for you. And what you are about to receive is not information. It is confirmation of something your spirit already knows, but your mind has not yet been given full permission to believe. The phenomenon of eyes changing during a final awakening is not something that belongs only to the language of spirituality. It is something that chosen ones across cultures and centuries and contexts have described with a consistency that is impossible to dismiss as coincidence. They speak of a shift in perception so fundamental that the world they have always looked at appears to them as though they are seeing it for the first time. Colors carry a depth they did not previously possess. The faces of people they have known for years suddenly reveal dimensions that were always there but invisible to them before. The natural world, trees and sky, and the particular quality of light at certain hours of the day begins to communicate something they cannot quite articulate but cannot ignore. And beneath all of these external observations is an internal shift that is even more significant. A change in what the eyes of the heart are able to perceive. A new and growing capacity to see truth where before there was only confusion. To see purpose where before there was only pain. To see the hand of heaven in places where before there was only the apparent randomness of a difficult life. Bartimaeus knew this moment. He knew it in the most literal and immediate way possible, because for him it was not a gradual dawning but an instantaneous transformation. One moment darkness, the next moment light. One moment the world reduced to sound and texture, and the careful navigation of a life lived without sight. The next moment the full and overwhelming and beautiful reality of everything that had always been. There, suddenly visible, suddenly present, suddenly undeniable. And the gospel record tells us that the first thing those newly opened eyes saw was Jesus, not the crowd, not the road, not the landscape of Jericho spread out around him. The first object of his restored sight was the face of the one who had spoken him into seeing. And that sequence is not accidental, it is a pattern. When heaven opens the eyes of a chosen one, the first thing those eyes are calibrated to see is not the circumstances. It is the presence that has been with them through all of it. This is what is happening to you. Your eyes are not simply becoming more perceptive in a general sense. They are being calibrated. They are being tuned to a specific frequency of seeing that will allow you to perceive the presence that has been with you through every dark season, every silent year, every moment of sitting by the road while the world moved past you without stopping. You have always been accompanied. You have never once been alone in any room you entered or any season you survived. But your eyes were not yet open to see the one who was there. And as the awakening moves through you, as the frequency rises and the veil continues to lift, the evidence of that presence in your past is becoming visible to you in a way it never was before. And that visibility is changing not just how you see your history, but how you approach your future. There are specific signs that mark a chosen one whose eyes are in the process of this final opening, and many of you will recognize what is being described here not as something you are hoping to experience, but as something that is already happening to you. The first sign is a growing inability to be satisfied by what used to be enough. The things that once occupied your attention, the distractions and the entertainments and the comfortable routines that kept the deeper questions at a manageable distance, have begun to feel hollow in a way that cannot be ignored. You reach for what used to satisfy and find that it no longer reaches the place in you that needs to be fed. This is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that your capacity has grown beyond what was previously feeding it, and that heaven is creating a hunger in you that only the fullness of your assignment can satisfy. The second sign is a heightened sensitivity to the spiritual atmosphere of the spaces you enter. Chosen ones in the final stages of awakening begin to notice things about rooms and relationships and situations that others around them do not register. There is a quickening in your spirit when you are in the presence of something aligned with your purpose, and a discomfort, sometimes subtle and sometimes overwhelming, when you are in the presence of something that is not. This sensitivity is not a burden, though it can feel like one before you understand what it is. It is a navigational gift. It is your awakened eyes beginning to read the spiritual landscape of your life with an accuracy that your previous level of perception did not allow. Trust it. It is not anxiety and it is not oversensitivity. It is sight. The third sign is a change in your relationship with time. Chosen ones approaching their final awakening often describe a strange dual experience of time, a sense that certain moments are expanding, becoming dense with meaning and significance in a way that ordinary moments do not, while simultaneously feeling an urgency about their assignment that they did not feel before. The casual relationship with time that characterized earlier seasons of their lives no longer fits. There is a knowing that this season is specific, that what is available now will not be available in the same way later, and that the window of alignment they are currently standing in requires a different kind of attentiveness than they have previously brought to their lives. If you have been feeling this, if time has begun to feel both more precious and more purposeful than it once did, that is your awakened eyes reading the season correctly. The fourth sign is an increase in what can only be described as divine encounters, moments of synchronicity so specific and so perfectly timed that the language of coincidence simply cannot contain them. You think of a person and they contact you within the hour. You are searching for an answer, and it arrives through a source you did not anticipate. You are on the verge of a decision, and something happens that makes the right path undeniable. These moments are not random. They are the activity of a heaven that is increasingly able to reach you because your frequency has shifted, because your eyes are more open, because the static that used to interfere with the signal has been reduced by the very process of awakening you are moving through. You are becoming easier for heaven to work with, not because you have become more religious or more disciplined or more spiritually sophisticated, but because you have become more open, more receptive, more willing to see what is actually there rather than only what you expected to find. The fifth and perhaps most significant sign is a change in how you experience your own identity. The chosen one whose eyes are fully opening begins to feel, sometimes for the first time in their adult life, a settled sense of who they are that does not depend on external validation to remain intact. The opinions of others still register because you are human and connection matters, but they no longer have the power to destabilize the core of who you know yourself to be. There is an anchoring happening at the deepest level of your selfhood, a rootedness that is not rigidity but security, the security of someone who has finally seen clearly enough to know that what they carry is real, that what they were made for is specific, and that neither of those truths depends on anyone else's recognition to remain true. Bartimaeus did not go back to ask the crowd for permission to believe that he could see. He knew what had happened to him. He knew what his eyes were now doing that they had not done before. And he followed Jesus along the road, not because someone told him he was allowed to, but because his newly opened eyes could see exactly where the presence was moving, and he had enough sense and enough courage to move in that direction without waiting for the world to validate the decision. This is where you are standing right now. Your eyes are open. The presence is moving. And the road ahead of you, the road your awakened eyes are now able to see, is the road you were written for before a single day of your life began. The book of Ephesians, chapter 1, verse 18 says, "I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in his holy people." The eyes of your heart, not just the eyes in your head, but the deeper seeing organ, the one that perceives what physical eyes cannot reach, the one that is being opened and calibrated and enlightened right now as this final awakening moves through every layer of who you are. The hope to which you have been called is not a vague and general optimism. It is a specific and glorious inheritance that has your name written on it, and your eyes are finally opening wide enough to begin to see it clearly. The eyes that have been opening in you, the frequency that has been rising, the signs that you have been recognizing in your own life as you moved through what was just shared. None of that is accidental, and none of it is passive. Heaven does not awaken a chosen one simply so they can observe their own transformation from a comfortable distance. The awakening is always in service of something. The opening of the eyes is always followed by a direction to walk in. And the direction that is being placed before you now is not complicated, though it is demanding in the most beautiful and life-giving way that a demand can be. It is the direction of alignment. It is the call to bring your daily practice, the rhythm of your inner life, into conscious cooperation with what heaven is already doing in you. Bartimaeus, the moment his sight was restored, did not stand in the road and simply marvel at the fact that he could see. He followed. The seeing immediately produced a movement, a direction, a decision to orient his newly opened eyes toward the presence that had opened them, and to walk in whatever direction that presence was walking. This is the pattern for every chosen one at every stage of awakening. The gift of sight is not given so you can admire the view. It is given so you can find the road and walk on it with intention, and with the full weight of everything that has been deposited in you through every season of preparation you have survived. The practice of alignment is something that chosen ones have understood in different ways across different traditions and different centuries, but the essential shape of it has always been the same. It requires stillness. It requires a willingness to create space in the noise of your daily life for the frequency of heaven to reach you without competition. It requires what ancient practitioners called the discipline of presence, the intentional act of showing up every single day in a posture of receptivity, ready to receive what cannot be received when you are running at the speed that the world demands. And it requires consistency, not the exhausting, performance-driven consistency of someone trying to earn something, but the quiet, faithful consistency of someone who has tasted what happens when the frequency aligns and has decided that they want to live there rather than visit occasionally. For many chosen ones, the greatest obstacle to this kind of consistent practice is not willingness. It is the accumulated noise of a life that has been lived under pressure for a long time. The mind that has been trained by stress and urgency and the constant demands of survival does not easily find its way back to stillness. It knows how to perform. It knows how to process. It knows how to manage and navigate and push through. But the softer, deeper, more receptive mode of operation that genuine alignment requires, that open and unhurried interior space where heaven's frequency can actually land, that mode has been crowded out by everything the world has piled on top of it. And reclaiming it is not a matter of trying harder. It is a matter of creating the right conditions. This is why the daily practice of stillness matters so much for chosen ones in this season specifically. Not because any particular ritual holds power in some mechanical sense, but because intentional stillness is achievable. It does not require you to reorganize your entire life or carve out a retreat from your responsibilities or become someone you are not in order to access what is already inside you. A consistent, daily returning to silence is the crack in the door. It is the small, faithful act of turning toward the frequency that is already rising in you and giving it a specific and protected space in which to do its work. And what happens in those quiet moments, the interior life gently guided back to its natural home when the noise of the world is temporarily set aside, begins to extend its influence into the rest of your day in ways that accumulate over time into something genuinely transformative. Think of it as tuning an instrument, a violin that has been sitting in a difficult environment, subjected to changes in temperature and humidity, and the general wear of being carried through a demanding life, will drift out of tune. It does not lose its quality. The wood is still fine, and the strings are still capable of producing something extraordinary. but it needs to be brought back into alignment regularly, carefully, with the right tool and the right touch, in order to produce the music it was made for. Your mind is that instrument. Your calling is the music. And the daily practice of returning to your frequency is the tuning, the gentle, precise, consistent act of bringing yourself back into the alignment that allows what is in you to come out in the way it was designed to. The chosen ones who walk most fully in their awakening are not the ones who had the most dramatic conversion moments or the most spectacular overnight transformations. They are the ones who built the practice. They are the ones who decided, quietly and without fanfare, that every single day they would show up in the posture of alignment, would give heaven a consistent and protected window of access to their interior life, and would trust that the cumulative effect of that faithfulness would produce what no single extraordinary moment could manufacture. They are the ones who understood that the awakening is not a destination you arrive at once and then occupy forever without tending to it. It is a living thing that requires daily cooperation, daily attentiveness, daily willingness to return to the frequency, even when the noise of the world has been particularly loud. And the fruit of that daily practice is not just personal. This is the part that chosen ones sometimes miss in the early stages of their awakening, when the transformation feels so interior and so private that it is easy to frame it as being primarily about themselves. But the frequency you carry, when it is fully aligned and consistently tended, does not stay contained within the borders of your own life. It radiates. It affects the people around you in ways you will sometimes see and often will not. The room you walk into changes when you enter it, not because you perform anything or announce anything or try to create an effect, but because a tuned instrument in a room full of instruments that are slightly out of tune will begin to pull the others toward alignment simply by being present. This is the ministry of the chosen one who has done the work of awakening. Not a platform necessarily, not a title or a position or a publicly recognized role, but a presence that carries something real and transferable and quietly revolutionary. There are people in your life right now who are waiting for what is going to come out of you as this awakening completes itself in you. They do not know they are waiting for it. They could not name what is missing in their experience of being around you currently versus what it will feel like to be around you when you are fully aligned and fully operating in the frequency you were made to carry. But heaven knows, and heaven has arranged certain relationships in your life, not primarily for what those people will give to you, but for what you will carry to them once the work being done in you right now has reached its fullness. This is why consistency in your practice is not just self-care. It is stewardship. It is the responsible tending of a gift that was never only for you. Every day that you show up in alignment is a day that the frequency in you grows stronger and cleaner and more capable of doing what heaven sent it into the world to do. Every moment of stillness that you give to the practice of returning to your natural state is an investment not just in your own clarity and creativity and peace, but in the lives of every person who will be touched by what flows out of you as a result. If this message has been reaching something real in you, if the words that have been spoken over the course of this time together have been landing in a place that feels like recognition rather than information, then the most natural and beautiful response is to carry it forward. Share what you have received. Not because a number matters, not because an algorithm needs feeding, but because there are chosen ones in your life and in your network who are sitting exactly where you were sitting before this message found you, sensing something shifting in them, unable to name it, not yet knowing that what they are experiencing has a name and a direction and a community of others who understand. When you share this, you are not promoting content. You are extending a hand to someone who is reaching for something they cannot yet see. And if this space has become one where you find yourself returning, where something in what is spoken here consistently meets something in what is stirring in you, then consider making that connection a supported one. There is a link in the description and in the pinned comment below where you can contribute to the continued work of creating these messages, these spaces of alignment and awakening for chosen ones who need them. It is not an obligation. It is an invitation extended to those for whom it resonates to become part of what this community is building together. One frequency, one awakened life, one faithful practice at a time. Like this message if it has spoken to something real in you. Subscribe if you want to remain in the flow of what is being released through this channel in this season. And share it with the one person who comes to mind right now as you hear these words, because that person coming to mind is not random. That is your awakened eyes already doing their work, already seeing who needs what you have just received. Trust that sight, act on it. The road is open, the frequency is rising, and what you carry is needed more than you know. Every attack that has ever come against you was a confession. It was the enemy's acknowledgement, written in the language of opposition and interference and carefully timed disruption, that what you carry is real enough to threaten something. Darkness does not mobilize against what is harmless. It does not organize its forces against a life that poses no risk to its agenda. The level of warfare you have experienced, the specific and sometimes relentless nature of the opposition that has followed you through different seasons and different circumstances and different versions of your life, is not evidence that you are cursed or forgotten or somehow outside the protection of heaven. It is evidence of the opposite. It is the clearest possible confirmation that what is inside you is significant enough to have been identified as a target long before you identified it as a gift. Bartimaeus knew something about this. His blindness was not simply a physical condition. In the world he inhabited, blindness carried a social and spiritual weight that compounded the physical reality into something far more encompassing. He was not just a man who could not see. He was a man who had been defined by his inability, whose entire social position and daily existence had been organized around the assumption that what he lacked would always be the most significant fact about him. The attack on his life was not a single dramatic event. It was the slow, grinding, accumulated pressure of a world that had decided his limitation was his identity, and that had built structures around that decision that were designed to keep him exactly where he was. The roadside, the cloak, the beggar's bowl, the daily performance of a diminishment that was never actually true, but that had been reinforced so consistently, and for so long that the line between the performance and the reality had become almost impossible to locate. This is the most sophisticated form of attack that the enemy deploys against chosen ones. Not the dramatic, visible assault that can be identified and resisted and prayed against with clarity and conviction, but the slow erosion, the patient, persistent, almost imperceptible process of convincing a chosen one that their limitation is their identity, that what they lack is more defining than what they carry, that the roadside is where they belong and the cloak is who they are, and the beggar's bowl is the appropriate vessel for a life like theirs. This attack works over time. It works through repetition. It works through the accumulated voices of people who did not know what they were carrying when they spoke diminishment over you, and through circumstances that seemed to confirm what those voices said, and through seasons of waiting that stretched long enough to make the promise feel like a fantasy you had invented to survive the reality of your disappointment. But here is what the attack could never touch in Bartimaeus, and here is what it has never been able to touch in you despite everything it has thrown at you. The knowing. That quiet, stubborn, unkillable interior knowing that you were made for something more than the roadside, that the cloak was never your identity, that the bowl was never the measure of your capacity, that somewhere beneath all the accumulated evidence of a life that had not yet become what it was supposed to be, there was something real and specific and divinely authored that no amount of opposition could actually reach. You have felt that knowing at your lowest moments. You have felt it most intensely sometimes, when everything around you was loudest in its insistence that you were nothing more than your circumstances. And the fact that it survived, the fact that it is still there right now, identifiable and alive beneath everything the world has piled on top of it, is the most powerful testimony available to you that what heaven placed inside you is indestructible. The warfare intensifies before the breakthrough. This is a pattern so consistent across the stories of chosen ones throughout history that it functions almost as a law. The opposition does not increase because the enemy is winning. It increases because the enemy can see what you cannot yet see from your current vantage point, which is that the appointed moment is close. The attack that comes in the final season, before the door opens, is always the most aggressive, always the most targeted, always the most specifically designed to hit the exact place where your faith is most vulnerable, because that is the last opportunity to stop what heaven has already set in motion. And the fact that you are here, that you are still standing, that you are still seeking, that you are still open enough to receive this message and let it reach the places in you that need it most, means that the final assault did not accomplish what it was designed to accomplish. You are still here, and that itself is a declaration of victory that heaven is recognizing even if you are not yet able to fully receive it. The enemy studied you. This is not a comfortable thought, but it is an important one for chosen ones to hold with clear eyes. The specific nature of the attacks on your life, the way they targeted your particular vulnerabilities, the way they came at exactly the moments when you were most exposed, the way they used the people and the circumstances closest to you rather than distant and obvious threats, all of this reflects a level of specific attention that is only paid to someone whose assignment is significant. You were not attacked randomly. You were attacked intentionally by a force that understood what you were carrying and what it would mean if you ever walked in the fullness of it. And that level of intentional opposition, as painful and as costly as it has been, is one of the clearest confirmations available that your assignment is not small and your calling is not ordinary. But opposition has a ceiling and purpose has no ceiling. This is the asymmetry that chosen ones must hold onto in the seasons when the warfare feels overwhelming. The enemy can delay but cannot deny. It can disrupt but cannot destroy. It can create detours but cannot alter the destination that was written into your story before you were born. Every weapon formed against you has a limit built into it, a point beyond which it cannot go. A boundary set by the same sovereignty that wrote your days before one of them came to be. And the chosen one who understands this does not fight from a place of fear or desperation, clinging to a hope they are not sure is real. They fight from a place of settled confidence, the confidence of someone who has read the end of the story and knows that what is written there holds. The book of Isaiah, chapter 54, verse 17 declares, "No weapon forged against you will prevail, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you." This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and this is their vindication from me. This is their vindication from me, not from their own performance, not from their ability to defend themselves or prove their worth or outmaneuver the opposition through their own cleverness and strength. The vindication comes from the one who placed the assignment on their life, the one who knew before the weapons were formed that they would not prevail, the one who wrote the outcome before the battle began, and whose word over the life of a chosen one is more permanent and more powerful than anything the enemy has ever brought against them. Your vindication is coming from the same source, not because you fought perfectly or believed without wavering or never had a moment of doubt so deep it felt like drowning, but because the one who called you is faithful, and the faithfulness of the one who called you is not contingent on the consistency of the one who was called. You have been faithful in ways that no one has seen and no one has recorded except the one whose record is the only one that will ultimately matter. And that faithfulness, imperfect and sometimes barely holding together as it was, has been enough. It has been seen. It has been honored. And the vindication that is written into your story is moving toward you with the same certainty and the same inevitability as the sunrise, which does not ask permission and does not arrive late and does not fail to appear simply because the night was particularly long or particularly dark. Every person who misread you was working within the limits of what they could see, and what they could see was never the whole story. What they could see was the cloak and the roadside and the bowl, the external circumstances of a life that had not yet arrived at its moment of transformation. They could not see what was inside you. They could not see the frequency, the knowing, the indestructible seed of purpose that had survived everything they thought had defined you. But heaven could see it. Heaven has always been able to see it. And the awakening moving through you right now is in part the process of heaven making visible to you what it has always been able to see, so that you can walk in it with the same clarity and the same conviction that was always available to you, but that your unopened eyes could not yet receive. The attacks are not the story. They are the context in which the story is being told. And the story is one of a chosen one who was pressed and prepared and opposed and delayed and misread and misunderstood, and who arrived anyway, eyes open, frequency aligned, carrying everything that the journey deposited in them, at the exact moment that was written for them before a single day of their life began. That chosen one is you, and the arrival that has been written for you is not somewhere distant on the horizon. It is happening now, in this conversation, in this awakening, in these eyes that are seeing more clearly with every passing moment. Before you were formed in the womb, a voice spoke your name. Not the name your parents chose after deliberating over lists and family traditions, and the particular sound of syllables that felt right when they held you for the first time. A name that precedes that name. A name that exists in the language of eternity, the language in which heaven identifies its chosen ones not by what they have accomplished or what they have accumulated or what the world has decided to call them, but by what they were made to carry and what they were sent here to do. That name was spoken before the world had a place for you in it. It was spoken into the fabric of existence before your body was assembled, before your history was lived, before a single one of the experiences that have shaped you into who you are today had occurred. And the voice that spoke it has never stopped speaking it. It has been speaking it through every season of your life, in every register, through every circumstance, in the silence and in the storm, and in the long, quiet stretches of waiting that felt like nothing, but were actually the sustained breath of heaven holding the note of your name, until you were ready to hear it clearly. Bartimaeus heard his name called in a way that no one around him expected. He heard it not in the form of a word, but in the form of an invitation. Jesus said, "Call him." And when the message reached him, when the crowd that had been silencing him suddenly became the messenger of his summoning, something in Bartimaeus recognized the voice behind the invitation, even though it came through an unlikely source. He did not hesitate. He did not ask for clarification or request additional confirmation or wait until the circumstances felt more certain before he responded. He threw off his cloak and he came, because there is something in a chosen one that recognizes the voice that called them before they were born, even when it arrives wrapped in unexpected packaging, even when the messenger is the same crowd that moments before was telling them to be quiet, even when the timing seems too sudden, and the change too rapid for the careful, self-protective part of the mind to fully trust. You have been hearing that voice your entire life. You may not have always known what to call it. You may have attributed it at different times to intuition or instinct or the quiet counsel of your own deepest wisdom. You may have dismissed it in seasons when the noise around you was too loud or when the gap between what it was saying and what your circumstances seemed to confirm was too wide to bridge with the faith you had available at the time, but it was always there. In the moment before you made a decision that changed your life, it was there. In the room where something shifted and you walked out different from how you walked in, It was there. In the dream that stayed with you when every other dream dissolved, in the knowing that persisted when every logical reason to abandon it had been exhausted, in the stubborn, quiet, unkillable sense that you were made for something specific and real and not yet fully visible. It was there. It has always been there. And what is happening in you right now, this final awakening, this opening of eyes that were always meant to see, is in large part the process of that voice becoming audible to you in a way it never quite has been before. The eternal dimension of your calling is something that chosen ones often struggle to hold without either shrinking from it because it feels too large or inflating it into something that is more about ego than assignment. But the truth of it is neither small nor inflated. It is simply real. You were known before you were formed. Your days were written before you lived them. The assignment that has been stirring in. You, the one you have circled around and approached and retreated from and approached again through the different seasons of your seeking, was not generated by your ambition or your desire or your spiritual striving. It was placed. It was authored. It was deposited into the fabric of who you are by a hand that does not place things carelessly or without purpose, and what was placed in you was placed there because there is something specific that needs to be done in this world, in this time, that requires exactly what you carry. The enemy has worked so hard to make you forget this, not to destroy you necessarily, though destruction is always a welcome outcome from that perspective, but simply to make you forget, to bury the memory of the voice that called you under enough noise and pain and disappointment and distraction that you stop orienting your life toward what was placed inside you and start orienting it instead toward mere survival, toward managing what is rather than moving toward what was always intended. A chosen one who has forgotten their name, who has lost contact with the voice that spoke them into purpose before the world had a chance to speak diminishment over them, is a chosen one whose gift is contained, whose frequency is suppressed, whose light is present but not yet shining at the intensity it was designed to reach. But you have not forgotten. That is the testimony of the fact that you are here. That is the testimony of the restlessness and the searching and the refusing to be fully satisfied by anything less than the real thing. That is the testimony of the knowing that has survived everything the world has thrown at it, and is still alive and still rising and still reaching toward the voice that spoke it into being before time began. You have not forgotten your name. You have been in the process of remembering it. And that process of remembering, which is another way of describing everything that this awakening is doing in you, is now reaching a point of clarity that will make it impossible for you to continue living as though the name the world gave you is the only name you have. The calling that was spoken over you before you were born is not waiting for you to become someone else before it can be fulfilled. It is not waiting for you to resolve every wound or answer every doubt or achieve some threshold of spiritual maturity that you are not yet sure you have reached. It was spoken over who you are, over the specific and unrepeatable combination of experience and capacity and perspective, and pain and joy and longing that makes you precisely you, and it was spoken knowing everything that you would go through between the moment it was issued and the moment you would be ready to fully receive it. Heaven did not make a miscalculation about what you would face. It did not overestimate your resilience or underestimate the cost of the journey. It saw it all, accounted for all of it, and spoke the calling over you anyway, because what is in you was always sufficient for what was ahead of you, even in the moments when nothing about your circumstances confirmed that truth. The book of Jeremiah, chapter 1, verse 5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb I knew you, before you were born I set you apart, before I formed you, before the biological process began, before the chain of events that resulted in your specific existence had been initiated. The knowing came first. The setting apart came first, and everything that has happened since, every year of your life, every season of preparation and pressing and waiting and breakthrough, has been the unfolding of something that was established before any of it began, You are not trying to become chosen. You were chosen before you arrived. You are not working toward a calling. You were called before you had the capacity to respond. And the awakening moving through you now is not the beginning of your story with heaven. It is the moment in the story where you finally have eyes open wide enough to see how long that story has actually been going on. There are people who will encounter you in the next season of your life who will not be able to explain what they sense in your presence. They will not have language for the particular quality of what it feels like to be around you when you are walking in the fullness of what was placed in you. They will know only that something in the room shifts when you enter it, that something in them responds to something in you, in a way that bypasses their analytical mind and reaches something deeper, something that recognizes frequency, the way one instrument recognizes the tuning of another. You will not always see this happening. You will not always receive the feedback that confirms it, but it will be real, and it will be the natural consequence of a chosen one who has said yes to the voice that called them, who has done the work of awakening, who has allowed the eyes of their heart to be open to the full dimension of what was placed inside them before the world began. Right now, in this moment, something is being confirmed in you that has been building through everything shared in this conversation. Type the words, "I remember," in the comments below. Not as a performance and not as a formula, but as a declaration from the part of you that is waking up to the truth that the voice that called you before you were born has never stopped calling, and that you are finally, fully, in this moment, beginning to hear it clearly. I remember. Let those two words be the sound of a chosen one stepping back into the name that was always theirs. The signs have been converging for longer than you realize, not arriving one by one in a neat and orderly sequence that your analytical mind could track and catalog and draw conclusions from with the comfortable certainty of someone assembling a puzzle whose final image they can already see on the box. They have been converging the way rivers converge, each one moving through its own particular landscape, shaped by its own particular terrain, carrying its own particular history of rain and stone, and the long, patient work of water finding its level, until suddenly they are no longer separate currents but a single body of water moving with a force and a direction that neither river possessed alone. What has been happening in your life across multiple dimensions simultaneously, the internal shifts and the external signs and the relational reorganizations and the strange and specific synchronicities and the growing clarity about who you are and what you carry, all of it is converging. And what is forming at the place of convergence is not something you need to manufacture or engineer or talk yourself into believing. It is simply what happens when heaven's timing arrives and the preparation that has been underway in a chosen one for years finally reaches the moment it was always moving toward. Bartimaeus experienced convergence in a single afternoon. The years of sitting by the road, the developed sensitivity of hearing that blindness had given him, the specific moment when Jesus chose to pass through Jericho on that particular day, the crowd that was present to witness what was about to happen, the courage that rose in Bartimaeus at exactly the right moment to cry out rather than remain silent, the willingness of Jesus to stop. None of these elements was random, and none of them operated independently of the others. They were streams that had been moving toward each other for a long time, shaped by the particular landscape of Bartimaeus' life and the eternal purposes of the one who had authored both the landscape and the life. And when they met, when all of it came together in that one charged and luminous moment on the road outside Jericho, what resulted was not just the healing of one man's eyes. It was a demonstration, recorded and preserved across 2,000 years, of what happens when a chosen one's appointed moment arrives, and they have the courage and the clarity to recognize it and respond to it without reservation. Your appointed moment is not approaching. It is here. This is the thing that is perhaps the most difficult to receive, not because it is too small to be believed, but because it is large enough that the part of you that has been disappointed before is cautious about fully opening to it. You have been here before, or so it has felt. You have had seasons that felt like threshold moments, seasons where everything seemed to be aligning, and the air carried that particular quality of imminent change that chosen ones learn to recognize over time. And then the season shifted, and the alignment seemed to dissolve, and you found yourself back in a waiting that felt indistinguishable from the waiting you thought you had finished. And that experience, repeated often enough, teaches a person to hold hope at a careful distance, to approach the threshold with one hand extended and one hand held back, just in case. But this moment is different, and the difference is not in the external signs, though those are real and those are converging. The difference is in you. The Bartimaeus who sat by the road in the years before Jesus passed through was not the same interior person as the Bartimaeus who threw off his cloak and leaped to his feet and came forward without hesitation when the call reached him. Something had been formed in him through the years of waiting that was not there at the beginning of the waiting. A quality of readiness that is not the same thing as eagerness. A depth of certainty that is not the same thing as confidence. A settledness in the knowing that is not the same thing as having resolved every question. He was ready in the way that only someone who has been genuinely prepared can be ready, not because the preparation was comfortable, but because it was thorough. And you are ready in that same way, not because you have arrived at some ideal version of yourself that you have been working toward, but because the journey has done in you what it was designed to do, and what has been formed in you through the pressing and the waiting and the surviving is exactly what is needed for what comes next. The convergence you are experiencing right now has specific characteristics that are worth naming, because chosen ones in the middle of their appointed moment sometimes cannot see it clearly precisely because they are inside it. The first is a quality of acceleration. Things that have been moving slowly or not at all are beginning to move with a speed that surprises you. Connections are forming, opportunities are appearing, inner clarity is arriving on questions that have been unresolved for years, and the pace of change both inside you and around you has shifted in a way that is unmistakable even if it is also slightly disorienting. This acceleration is not chaos, it is convergence. The rivers are meeting. The force of what is forming at the place where they join is greater than what any single stream could generate alone. The second characteristic is a quality of recognition. You are beginning to recognize things, people, places, moments, ideas, that feel familiar in a way that bypasses ordinary familiarity. There is a sense of having arrived somewhere you were always meant to be, of encountering something you were always meant to encounter, that does not depend on prior experience to feel true. This recognition is your spirit, responding to alignment. It is the deep interior knowing that has been with you through every season of your life, registering that what is happening around you now is consistent with what was placed inside you before the world began. Trust that recognition. It is one of the most reliable navigational instruments available to a chosen one in the season of convergence, more reliable than external validation, more reliable than the opinions of people who cannot see what you are seeing, more reliable than the cautious voice of a mind that has been trained by disappointment to hold hope at a careful distance. The third characteristic is a quality of release. Things that you have been carrying that were never yours to carry are becoming easier to set down. Offenses that you have held for years, because letting go of them felt like losing something important, are loosening their grip. Identities that were assigned to you by people and circumstances that did not know what you were made of are falling away with less resistance than you expected. The cloak of Bartimaeus is coming off not through effort but through the natural momentum of a life that has found its direction and is moving in it. You are becoming lighter, not because the weight of your assignment is diminishing, but because you are finally carrying it in the right posture, the posture of someone who knows they were made for what they are carrying rather than someone who is not. Sure, they deserve it and therefore holds it awkwardly and at a distance from their own center. The fourth characteristic is a quality of hunger that is specific rather than general. In earlier seasons, the longing you carried may have been diffuse, a reaching toward something you could not name, a dissatisfaction with what was that pointed toward something more without being able to describe what that something more actually looked like. But in the season of convergence, the hunger becomes focused. You begin to know not just that you want more, but what the more actually is. The assignment begins to take shape with a specificity that earlier seasons did not allow. The gifts that were always in you begin to find their particular expression with a clarity that makes the next step visible, even when the full path is still not completely in view. This focused hunger is one of heaven's ways of directing a chosen one in the final approach to their moment. Follow it. It knows where it is going even when your analytical mind is still catching up. The book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 3 says, "For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay." It will certainly come. Not it might come if the conditions align. Not it will come if you perform well enough or believe consistently enough or manage to hold on to faith through every moment of the long and sometimes brutal wait. It will certainly come. The appointment was made before the waiting began. The end that the revelation speaks of was written before the first day of the journey toward it. And the convergence happening in your life right now is the sound of that certainty arriving. The sound of what was always going to happen beginning to happen, the sound of rivers that have been moving toward each other for a very long time, finally meeting in the place that was always their destination. You are at the confluence. You are standing at the place where everything that has been moving through your life is joining into something greater than any single element of your story could have produced alone. The pain is here, transmuted into depth. The waiting is here, transmuted into readiness. The opposition is here, transmuted into the evidence of your significance. The gifts are here, no longer buried under the accumulated weight of a world that did not know what to do with them, but rising, clarified and focused and alive, toward the expression they were always meant to find. And your eyes, those awakening, changing, finally fully opening eyes, are here, seeing it all with a clarity that is the gift of every dark season you survived, and every moment of pressing that formed something in you that lighter experiences never could have produced. The final awakening is not something that will happen to you someday. It is something that is happening to you now, in this conversation, in this moment, in the convergence of everything that has been moving toward this point in your story. You are not waiting for it to begin. You are inside it, and what your newly opened eyes are seeing, as the rivers join and the force of what is forming carries you forward into everything that was always written for you, is not the end of something. It is the beginning of everything that the beginning was always preparing you for. You will never see the same way again. Let that land not as a promise you are reaching toward, but as a reality you are already standing inside of. Because everything that has been spoken over you in the course of this conversation has not been building toward a future moment of transformation that you still need to earn or achieve or wait for with patient uncertainty. It has been describing what is already in motion. In you, what has already begun, what your own spirit has been confirming with every internal response, every quickening, every moment of recognition that rose in you as the words found the places in you they were always meant to reach. The awakening is not coming. You are not approaching the threshold. You have already crossed it, and the eyes that are reading the world around you right now are not the same eyes that began this journey with you, because something has shifted in the interior architecture of your perception that cannot be unshifted, that cannot be returned to what it was before, that has been permanently and gloriously altered by the frequency of what heaven has been speaking over you. This is the nature of a final awakening. It does not reverse. It does not ebb and flow with the seasons the way earlier stages of spiritual growth sometimes do, advancing in periods of intensity and retreating in periods of ordinariness, leaving the chosen one uncertain about whether what they experienced was real or whether the reality of it will hold when the feeling fades. A final awakening is not a feeling. It is a structural change. It is the difference between a door that has been opened and a wall that has been removed. When a door opens, it can close again. When a wall comes down, the room is permanently larger. What has been happening in you through this season, through every element of preparation and pressing and waiting, and the specific and deliberate process of having your eyes open to what was always there, is not a door opening. It is a wall coming down. And the room you are now living in is larger than any room you have occupied before, and it will not shrink back to its previous dimensions because the enlargement was not produced by your emotional state or your spiritual performance. It was produced by the sovereign and irreversible work of heaven in a chosen one whose appointed moment has arrived. Bartimaeus followed Jesus along the road, not back to Jericho, not back to the cloak or the bowl or the identity that the roadside had assigned him. Forward, along the road, in the direction that the presence was already moving, with newly opened eyes that were calibrated to see what they had never been able to see before, and a freedom in his body, and his spirit that the years of sitting and waiting had been without. His knowing it, preparing him to fully inhabit. He did not walk that road tentatively. He did not move forward with the careful, self-protective hesitation of someone who is not sure the healing will hold, who keeps glancing back at the place where the cloak is lying in the dust just in case they need to return to it. He walked with the confidence of a man whose eyes were open, whose name had been called, whose moment had arrived, and who had the courage and the clarity to receive it completely rather than partially. This is the invitation standing before you now, not to believe more or try harder or reach for something that is still out of your grasp, but to receive completely what is already yours, what has already been released over you, what your own spirit has been saying yes to throughout this entire conversation. The cloak is on the ground, the road is open, the presence is moving forward, and your eyes, those eyes that have been changing in ways you could not explain and are now changing in ways you are beginning to understand, are open wide enough to see exactly where to place your next step. There is a prayer that needs to be spoken over you before this conversation closes, not because prayer is a ritual that makes something happen that would not otherwise occur, but because there are words that belong to this moment, words that heaven has been holding for you, words that your spirit needs to hear spoken out loud over the specific and unrepeatable reality of who you are and what you carry and where you are standing right now at the threshold of everything that was always written for you. So receive this now. Breathe. Let the noise of everything competing for your attention step back for just this moment, and let these words reach the place in you that is deepest and most real. Father, I bring before you this chosen one who has traveled a road that was longer and harder than most people around them will ever understand. I speak over them now in this moment of final awakening. Let the eyes of their heart be fully opened. Let every veil that remains be lifted with gentleness and with grace. Let them see themselves the way you have always seen them, not through the lens of their failures or their fears or the accumulated judgments of people who did not know what they were carrying, but through the lens of the calling you placed in them before the world began. Let the frequency that you designed them to carry rise now without interference, without suppression, without the static of old wounds and old words and old agreements with diminishment that were never true. Let them walk forward from this moment with the settled confidence of a chosen one who knows their name, who hears the voice that called them, who has eyes wide open to the presence that has been with them through every season they survived. And let everything that was written for them before a single day of their life begin to become visible in the world around them, not in the distant future, but in the days immediately ahead, as a confirmation. To them and to everyone connected to them that what heaven chooses, heaven completes. Let it be so, let it be so, let it be so. That prayer was not spoken into the air. It was spoken over you, specifically, by name, in the language of heaven that knows your name before you speak it and holds your story before you have lived it. And what was spoken will not return empty. It will accomplish what it was sent to accomplish in your life, and the evidence of that accomplishment will begin to appear in ways that your newly opened eyes will be perfectly equipped to recognize. The journey that brought you to this moment was not wasted. Not one day of it, not one tear of it, not one silent, grinding, barely holding on moment of it. All of it was the road that led here, and here is where everything changes. Here is where the chosen one who was pressed and prepared and opposed and delayed and misread and misunderstood arrives at the place that was always written for them. Eyes open, frequency aligned, carrying everything that the journey deposited in them, ready at last to walk in the fullness of what was placed inside them before the world had the chance to tell them who to be. You are not the same person who began listening to this message. Something has shifted. Something has been spoken. Something has been received in the deep interior of who you are that will continue to unfold and expand and produce fruit in your life long after this conversation has ended. The awakening is irreversible. The eyes that have been opened will not close again, and the road that stretches out before you, lit by the frequency of what you carry and the clarity of what you can now see, leads somewhere extraordinary. If this message has reached something real in you today, if these words have landed in a place that feels like home, then carry it forward. Share it with the chosen one in your life who is sitting by the road right now, sensing something shifting in them, not yet knowing that what they are experiencing has a name and a direction and a community of others who understand. Like this message as a declaration that what was spoken here was real. Subscribe to remain connected to what heaven continues to release through this space, because this conversation is not the end of something. It is the beginning of a continued unfolding that you will not want to miss. And if this community has become a place where your spirit consistently finds nourishment and alignment, consider supporting the continued work of creating these spaces through the link in the description and the pinned comment below. Every contribution, whatever its size, is an act of stewardship, a chosen one investing in the awakening of other chosen ones who are still finding their way to the road. You are chosen, you are seen, you are known by name in the language of eternity. Your eyes are open, your frequency is rising, and what comes next for you is not a continuation of what has been. It is the beginning of everything that the beginning was always preparing you for. Walk forward. The road is yours, and you will never, ever see the same way again.